So I guess I'll just be picking up where I left off. The next album is going to be After Hours by The Weeknd. Yeah, this is a pretty overall great album. I'll start off by talking about what I don't like about the album. There's just a couple tracks, 2 or 3 really overall. But yeah, pretty much every track but a couple of them are just absolute bangers, you know. I could listen to them on their own. They're even better in the context of the album. Some of the singles for this album were released, in 2019, so I might not want to include this, but some of them weren't. But yeah, overall, the production on this album is very 80s inspired, more towards the end of the album, but also just throughout the entire album. It sounds like very 80s inspired. Some of the songs even sound like they could have been released in the 80s and no one would have been able to really tell the difference between them. But the production overall is just pretty high quality. Most of the songs are produced by The Weeknd himself, with a few of them having production from Metro Boomin, like on the song Heartless, which is an absolute trap banger. There's really no difference between it and a typical trap song, besides the fact that instead of the typical vocal style that a trap artist would do, The Weeknd has his own little style, so you can tell it doesn't necessarily sound like trap. If there was a Travis Scott over that beat, then everyone would say it's a rap song, it's trap, but just a little bit of an interesting thing to say there. Alright, so the next album is RTJ4 by Run the Jewels. Now, this album is packed filled with a bunch of bangers. The lyrical content on this is definitely possibly the best, or one of the best out of any albums that I've listened to in 2020. Now, the reason why I'm giving it an 8, the only drawback on this album is that there's a couple of the tracks that I feel like just sound kind of generic in the Run the Jewels catalog, in the way that I wouldn't really listen to them unless I was just listening to this album fully through. They're not very different sounding, and they're just kind of a little bit boring. Now, that's a few, but most of the tracks on here have very good production and great verses, great flows, and also some pretty good features, surprisingly. Alright, so the next album is going to be Strange Times by Gorillaz. On this album, almost every single song on it is good, and I'm talking about not about the bonus tracks, I'm just talking about the main tracks here, right, which there's 12, right? Almost every single song on this is great, except for 2. It's Chalk Tablet and Dead Butterflies that I'm not so crazy on. Those songs aren't necessarily bad, they're just kind of not for me. But besides that, every single one of them sounds unique and sounds uniquely an absolute banger. On this album, it's more single focused than the other Gorillaz albums, but it still manages to sound cohesive overall. And because it's single focused, it means that you could listen to any of the songs on the album outside of the album. And when you're listening to the full album, every single one of the songs is just an absolute banger. This album almost reminds me of if Humans was done better, in the way that a lot of the songs are very consumed by the feature, and Damon Albarn doesn't really have much of a vocal presence on them, but that's kind of the whole point of the album. This is also not a very rap-based album. There's only a couple songs that really fit into the hip-hop genre on this album. Even the songs that have rappers on them, a lot of the time aren't rap, and it really gets the features to go outside their comfort zone, Next I listened to 2017 to 2019 by Against All Logic. I did a review for this one, so I'm not gonna say that much about it, but it's a pretty good album with it's an instrumental album. Got some pretty banger instrumentals overall. Yeah, just kind of like it. Good background music. Next we have Limbo by Aminé. Now, on this album, there's only really one song I don't like, and it's right here. But all the other songs are definitely listenable at the very least. But the problem is, I feel like, first of all, this album is not very, not bloated, but a few of the songs could have been taken off. Because a few of the songs just kind of sound, on the context of the album, a little bit generic, I suppose. He doesn't really have the most unique vocal style. On a couple of the songs, he sounds like other people, and to the point where it gets to almost be a ripoff on some of them. Not quite getting to that level, but that's just for all of the stuff I don't like about the album. But for the stuff I do like, as I said, every song is listenable on the album, and it actually churns out some pretty good bangers. Pressure My Palms is probably the best song in the album. It has this beat switch towards the end, which is like something you wouldn't expect in a song like this, but the first beat is just mainly comprised of this like bass line. I don't really want to get too into the specifics of one song on this video. It's just a pretty good album filled with a lot of bangers. The production, while not being the most inventive, is still very good overall on the album. And it's got some very high quality features. And Aminé himself is also pretty good on the album, I suppose. Alright, so next we have Last Year Was Weird by Tkay. So Anthony Fantano put out a review of this, and I just believe everything he says, to be honest. So you can just go and watch that. I don't really have to say anything. Next we have Burden of Proof by Benny the Butcher. I kind of just don't like his rapping style that much. I think it just makes it so that all of the songs sound very similar. He doesn't really have the most unique voice. He just kind of makes old head rap. The instrumentals are pretty good, but it kind of is in a situation where all of the songs sound very similar, so it makes me really not want to necessarily listen to them, and he's just kind of mediocre, so couple highlights. Next we have Nightmare Vacation by Rico Nasty. This album is definitely her best and is definitely filled with a ton of bangers. Most of the tracks on this album slap. A lot of them extremely slap. Now, a lot of this album is what she's known for primarily, you know, like the aggressive songs, but there are a few songs that step out of that, like iPhone, which is a hyperpop banger. And yeah, also Anthony Fantano really did review this album, so I don't really need, I was just gonna say. And last but not least, we have Savage Mode 2 by 21 Savage and Metro Boomin. Now, I'd say that this is actually almost the perfect trap album. Almost every single song I could listen to, and they're almost all bangers. The production is, while not being necessarily inventive, very high quality and very interesting throughout the album, actually. There's a lot of different types of beats. Think of like the typical Metro Boomin production, but just taken to a very high level. A lot of different instruments and a lot of multifaceted instrumentals. And there are a few instrumentals that are a little bit more simple, but in their simplicity, they are very runnin', rich stuff. Many Men, Steppin', Glock in My Lap. All of them bangers. So yeah, that's gonna be the closing for this video, I guess. Said I'd release in a week, and I probably did, hopefully.